Fresh after saying how his government wanted to eliminate single-use plastics altogether, comes a picture now of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau being photographed in his home riding of Papineau, Quebec, with all of his staff enjoying pizza with plastic knives and forks. Joining me now to discuss this is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me from Toronto. Brian, last time I checked, plastic knives and forks are considered single-use plastics.
Well, if you're cheap like me, you might wash them and use them again, but that requires being cheap like me. There's so many problems wrong with this photo, Hal. One, who eats pizza with a knife and fork? Secondly, the guy has just made the announcement, okay, we need to ban single-use plastics. And then thirdly, and this was pointed out by the sharp-eyed Chris Sims, a former alumnus of you and I back in our TV days elsewhere, who's now with the BC Taxpayers Federation, and she said, for the love of all that's holy, why are Trudeau's slices of pizza, why are they upside down? And when you look at the photo, his pizza slices are upside down. I never noticed that, but very good question. What it has done is it's allowed the Conservatives to simply, without much effort, say, well, that guy's a hypocrite. And then, media outlets who had already been paying attention to this. I mean, let me tell you, this was chatter within newsrooms across the country. But okay, do we do a story on it? People are picking up on it online. Do we just put it in our trending section? What do we do with it? Oh, the Conservatives said they're hypocrites. They're all running stories about it now, which doesn't help the Prime Minister on this. And it's also online. It started people bringing up, oh, look at this photo. He's sitting at a picnic table with David Lametti, who's now Justice Minister at St. Jean-Baptiste, and they're eating poutine out of styrofoam cups with plastic water bottles next to them. The guy has made life difficult for himself, not only due to the announcement, but because he couldn't answer the simple question of, what do you do to reduce your single-use plastics use? And he said the drink box, water bottle sort of thing. But then all these other photos. It is going to be difficult for Justin Trudeau over the next several months on the campaign trail, let me tell you.
Wow. Brian, there are reports that China has now banned the import of all Canadian meat products. It seems that Beijing is really putting the squeeze on Ottawa to release the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. And FedEx is on the list to be banned as well?
Yeah, FedEx specifically, because they delivered documents that were meant for Huawei's office in Beijing to an office in the United States. They refused to deliver the Huawei documents because of, basically sanctions, for lack of a better word, that the Americans have put on. So, look, the Prime Minister is about to head off to the G20. He's going to be relying on Donald Trump's good graces, Donald Trump's economic and military and all other powers to kind of lean on the Chinese and say, stop picking on Canada because we asked them to stop your executive going through. The arrest of Meng Wanzhou back in, December, that's caused no end of problems for Canada. We've now had canola stopped. We've had soy exports, pea exports, pork. Then it started with a little bit of beef. Now it's all meat. They are taking a serious role. This is all because of one company, the company that Meng Wanzhou was the CFO for. We're talking about Huawei. If you don't know what Huawei is, cast your memory back to the Stanley Cup Finals, and every time you turned on the hot stove group, Ron McLean and Elliot Finkelman and all the guys around the table, they had Huawei in front of them. They sponsored everything related to Hockey Night in Canada. They have ingratiated themselves with Canadian universities sponsoring research chairs. They have hired top Canadian political operatives from all sides to be their executives in this country because they don't want to lose out on the 5G. I just want to make one other quick point, Hal. There was a major hack of 10 worldwide telco companies, and guess who was behind it? China. What's everyone's main concern with Huawei? That they are so close to the regime that they will hand over information to the regime in Beijing. So, the Americans don't want them to be part of our 5G network because they say all of our security, all of our, back and forth with the Five Eyes could be put at risk. This can't happen. Huawei's determined to make it happen, but the Chinese government, I don't think, is taking the right steps. It's going to be a very interesting G20 when Trudeau, Trump, and President Xi are all there.
Brian, the feds are continuing to fight provincial governments as part of their re-election campaign. The Trudeau Liberals have been taking shots at the Conservative premiers, including Ontario Premier Doug Ford.
Yeah, so they just announced how they're going to disperse some of the money. Of course, it's always been very strange. They say with the federal carbon tax, and hey, you get it on January 1st out there in Alberta, Hal. Get ready for it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. They said, okay, well, most of the money will go back to average citizens. Now, we've seen from the release of documents from the Canada Revenue Agency, well, the average rebate isn't actually panning out quite like what the feds claimed. So there's that problem. But they also, they said 90% of the money will go back. Well, what happens to the rest? They're deciding how it will go back. So they made an announcement today. Catherine McKenna, outside a public school in Ottawa, making the announcement that we're going to fund retrofits, energy retrofits of schools, $60 million. Where? In Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, in New Brunswick, and in Ontario, that nasty place run by Doug Ford. Oh, Doug Ford. 41 of the 60 million will go to Ontario. But here's the weird thing. They actually have to pass the money. They can't give the money directly to school boards, so they have to pass the money through the provincial government. The provincial governments could say no to this. That would be politically problematic, but it is part of an ongoing fight. So we'll see how this goes. Look, the House is adjourned for the summer on Parliament Hill. We are into full-on campaign mode. The idea that, when Stephen Harper called the election on August 2nd of 2015, that was the longest campaign ever. Poppycock. We're into the longest campaign ever right now. It's been going on for months. It's going to continue. Justin Trudeau has been in and out of Toronto at least 3 times since he declared a climate emergency. He's flown down to Toronto for the Raptors parade, for the Pride parade, to go to a Muslim event. Then he's flown off to Toronto or Montreal for the Pride Parade, to Quebec for the Pride Parade. He's gone to Whitby for different announcements. He is everywhere. And none of it has to do with government business. It's all about campaigning. But he's doing it on the public dime instead of when Stephen Harper declared that election on August 2nd, 2015. He did it so that all the leaders had to campaign on their party dime, not yours.
Now, there are many third-party groups already active leading up to the federal election, Brian. Now, one has raised the ire of some Canadians for a mass text asking their opinion of the controversial carbon tax.
Yeah, giant text going out. I didn't get it. I don't know if you did. I didn't see this. Oh, you did? Okay, so, I've heard from some people that did, and some were upset, some were not. Liberal MP Pam Damanoff saying, oh, this is outraged, and who's behind this? It's a group called Canada Strong. Now, there were attempts to say this is just like Ontario Proud. Well, I know the guy behind Ontario Proud. His name's Jeff Ballingall. Very effective in the last provincial election. Ran the largest social media campaign in the provincial election. Very effective against Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. And he's now doing the same thing at the federal level, but he calls himself Canada Proud. He says this was not him. And if it was, he would admit it because he was very upfront about what he was doing. He used this same technology in the last provincial campaign, says they may be using it in the federal campaign, but nobody at this point really knows who's behind this group.
Elections Canada has dropped a social media influence plan over concerns they were not exactly unbiased. Some actually call Justin Trudeau dreamy and perfect.
Oh, Hal, who among us has not called Justin Trudeau dreamy? I mean, I don't know what their problem is. Look, this is something that I had a problem with from the beginning. You get a bunch of young people that you're going to pay money to use their social media, their online presence to say, hey, go vote. Okay, have they been politically active before? Well, this was a question that the Conservatives brought up, and Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre said, who are they? Release the names. Tell us. We want to know who you're hiring. Elections Canada would only say they'd hired 13 people to do this. They would use their social media platforms. Elections Canada would produce a video that would be distributed widely on social media to encourage young people. This was specifically aimed at young people who already vote more heavily for the Liberals and the NDP than they do for the Conservatives compared to the rest of the population. So the Conservatives obviously had a problem with this. You're encouraging one group that already doesn't like us. Are you vetting them properly? Elections Canada, we can't tell you who they are. And the Conservatives started to say, well, wait a minute. Is it because you're scrubbing their social media platforms before you release the name. They finally released the names last week. Some of them you would know, Olympic athletes, some your kids would know because they're YouTube stars that you and I have never heard of, but your kids love them,
Right.
that sort of thing. Some of them had literally called Justin Trudeau dreamy, perfect. My prime minister makes me happy. One of them had endorsed the NDP's Leap Manifesto, a document so far left that Thomas Mulcair wouldn't have anything to do with it in the last election, that Jagmeet Singh kind of touches on but won't fully give a big hug to because it's so far left. And she, a former Miss Universe from Canada, had actually campaigned against Stephen Harper in the last election. All of them that were found to have partisan comments, and I'm sure more will come out, were all on the Liberal, mostly on the Liberal side, a couple on the NDP. None had been out there in favor of the Conservatives. So Pierre Poilievre had been called crazy. He'd been called, oh, you're just drumming up anxiety towards our elections referee. Turns out he was right. If the parties want to hire these people, go ahead. But Elections Canada is supposed to be the impartial referee. You can't have the referee trying to put the puck in the net. That's not how it works.
Right. As the Trudeau government keeps talking about fixing the tone on social media, it turns out one of the nastiest political trolls in Canada is in fact a government staffer, and his name was finally released.
Yeah, this is a guy who online goes by Neil before Zod. And Blacklock's reporter, I want to give this out. This is a small media outlet in Ottawa that does a lot of investigative stuff. And they found him and they called him up and they said, is this you? Yeah. What do you do? Well, he works for the federal government. Well, wait a minute. Let me tell you how I've been attacked by this guy. And he created a large social media following by attacking anyone that was not purely behind Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. He was nasty. He was vile. He was vulgar. The NDP has called him out. The Conservatives have called him out. If you're not behind Justin Trudeau, he will throw every nasty name and accusation he can think of behind you, and then all his minions jump on as well. I am fine with good back and forth debate. I haven't blocked this guy. A lot of MPs have. But then to find out that he's a Government of Canada employee, this was shocking. And it just goes to show, I've been saying for some time, the attacks on social media can be extremely nasty. They can be vile, they can be disgusting. But the implication constantly put forward by this government, especially certain parts of the current federal government, that it's only women and it's only Liberal women that are attacked, is nothing short of ridiculous. I have had threats against me. I have had accusations made against me. I've been called all sorts of names, vile and disgusting, as bad as anything I've heard from the women in the Liberal Party that have complained. Something needs to be done. I think it's maybe people getting their heads screwed on right. But, I'm not ready to say that the government needs to step in because they would ignore this guy while turning around and trying to make sure that people like me are put in their place. And I'm not being vile and disgusting.
Has he been fired or is he still on staff?
That is the difficult part to tell because he says, well, I'm not a government employee anymore. At this point, we simply don't know. He says he's left the civil service. The civil service, regulations say that, you can obviously have your own opinion. Everybody can, but you can't bring the civil service into disrepute. It's much like broadcasters. And people think that, this is horrible that a public servant might face that. But, think of, me working in newspapers. I used to work in radio and TV. You're in TV. If you bring your employer into disrepute, you can lose your job. And that is something that we all have to deal with. Why shouldn't a civil servant have to face the same sort of thing? You make people question whether your employer is actually doing the job that they're required to do. It doesn't look good on them.
Brian, there's a soap opera developing involving a Liberal MP who allegedly fathered a baby with a fired staffer. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so a little while ago, we got the news that this Toronto area Liberal MP, his name is Gang Tan, he's in the East End out towards Scarborough area of Toronto. He was, saying, oh, I'm not going to run again. Okay, well, there's been a lot of Liberal MPs saying they're not going to run again. What's the deal? But he didn't really say too much. Nobody knew too much. And then people started checking out local Chinese media. There's a lot of Chinese language media here. And it was from that story shows up in one small publication, then another small publication that he had, this girlfriend and that he impregnated her and then he hired her and then he fired her. His wife found out, and others claims he's not paying spousal or child support, and he's facing all kinds of these issues. And then he turns around and he tells the Hill Times, "Oh, I'm not the father. I'm just the sperm donor." What? This guy, it is absolutely bizarre, but this is what's happening. You got to remember, this guy's still in caucus. Okay, he's still in the Liberal caucus. This is just like, back to the whole ban single-use plastics and then have plastic knives and forks on your table. This is a government that calls itself a feminist government, and you've got one of your current MPs, one of your current caucus members, having impregnated a girlfriend, or at least allegedly impregnated his girlfriend, hired her on staff, fired her when his wife found out, not paying child support for this 2-year-old, and you haven't kicked him out yet? I know he said just recently that he's not running, and so they're scrambling to find a candidate, but why is he still in the Liberal caucus? I've seen Liberal MPs kicked out for less, not counting the Prime Minister, who may have experienced things differently.
The soap opera and the political world. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.